The phone call came at 11:47 p.m. on the worst storm we'd seen in Colorado in 20 years. Rain hammered against my apartment windows like it was trying to break in, and thunder shook the building every few minutes like God himself was angry at the world. I'd been grading papers, 10th grade essays on The Great Gatsby and the American Dream, ironic considering what was about to happen, when my phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. It was late, I was tired, and unknown numbers usually meant telemarketers or wrong numbers. But something, maybe instinct or maybe just the fact that no telemarketer calls at midnight in a storm, made me pick up. "Is this William Harris?" The voice was elderly, shaking with concern, barely audible over what sounded like dishes clattering in the background. "Yes, who's this?" "This is Doris from the Riverside Diner. I've got an old man here, says he's your grandfather?" "He's in a bad way, hon. Soaked through to the bone, won't say what happened, but he had your number written on a napkin in his pocket. Keeps asking for someone named Margaret." "My name is William Harris. I'm 32 years old, and I teach English at Mountain View High School in Denver. It's not the life my family expected. The Harrises were ranchers going back 4 generations. Men who worked the land with hands made rough by honest labor and measured wealth in acres and cattle rather than dollars and cents. The Double H Ranch had been our kingdom, our legacy, our identity for over a century. But I'd chosen books over beef, classrooms over corrals, and my father Richard had never forgiven me for it. That night, as I drove through the storm to collect my grandfather, I was about to learn just how deep family betrayals could run, and how sometimes the greatest tests come disguised as our darkest moments. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, I told Doris, already grabbing my keys from the bowl by the door, my hand shaking slightly. "Is he hurt? Does he need an ambulance?" "He says no, but honey, he's 87 years old and confused. Keeps saying he's sorry, talking to someone who isn't there. You might want to hurry. Keep him warm. I'm on my way." Margaret, my grandmother, dead for 5 years come November. She'd been the heart of our family, the one who held us all together with Sunday dinners and unconditional love. Since she'd passed, we'd all drifted apart like planets without a sun. Whatever had happened to put Grandpa Samuel out in this storm, it had shaken him badly enough to reach for ghosts. I threw on my rain jacket over my pajamas, no time to change properly, and grabbed my wallet and phone. My neighbor, Mrs. Chun, poked her head out as I rushed past. She was always awake, always watching, a guardian angel disguised as a nosy retiree. "Everything okay, William?" she asked, her eyes taking in my disheveled appearance. "Family emergency," I said, not slowing down. "If you hear my alarm going off, I forgot to set it." "Can you?" "I'll handle it," she said, "because that's what good neighbors do. Drive safe in this weather." The drive to Riverside Diner was treacherous. Water flooded the streets, turning intersections into lakes that my old Honda Civic wasn't designed to navigate. The windshield wipers fought a losing battle against the downpour, and I found myself leaning forward, squinting through the rain, praying I wouldn't hydroplane into a ditch. All I could think about was my 87-year-old grandfather, out in this weather, confused and calling for his dead wife. What could have happened? The last I'd heard, and admittedly, family communication had been sparse since I'd chosen teaching over ranching. Grandpa had sold the Double H and moved in with my parents. The sale had been big news 6 months ago. 4,000 acres of prime Colorado ranch land, in the family since 1892, sold to developers for $1.2 million. I'd called him when I heard, trying to hide my sadness at the loss of our heritage. "It's just land, Billy," he'd said, using my childhood nickname. "Can't take it with me, and I'm too old to work it anymore. Your dad says this is best for everyone. Your dad says." Even then, I'd noticed how he'd deferred to my father's judgment, how tired he'd sounded. But I'd been wrapped up in my own life, teaching, grading, trying to make a difference in kids' lives, and I'd let it slide. Now, driving through this biblical storm, I wondered what else I'd missed. The diner glowed like a beacon in the storm, its neon sign flickering but stubborn, the windows fogged with warmth and steam. I parked as close as I could and ran for the door, getting soaked in the 10 feet between my car and shelter. Inside, the familiar smell of coffee and grease wrapped around me like a blanket. And there, in a corner booth wrapped in what looked like several tablecloths, sat my grandfather. My heart broke at the sight of him. Samuel Harris, who'd once stood 6'2" and could wrestle a calf to the ground single-handed, looked small and fragile. His clothes were soaked through, clinging to a frame that had lost too much weight. His white hair, usually neatly combed, was plastered to his head like he'd been swimming. His hands, those capable, working hands that had taught me to tie knots and fix fences, trembled around a cup of coffee he couldn't seem to lift. "Grandpa," I said, sliding into the booth across from him, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's me. It's William. You're safe now." He looked at me, and for a terrifying moment I wasn't sure he recognized me. His blue eyes, usually sharp as a hawk's despite his age, were clouded with confusion and something else. Fear? Shame? Then his face crumpled like paper, and he was crying, great gasping sobs that shook his whole body. "William? That you, boy? Really you?" "It's me, Grandpa. I'm here. You're safe." I reached across the table, took his cold hands in mine. "What happened? What are you doing out here in this storm?" "He threw me out," he said, the words barely audible between sobs. "Richard threw me out. Said I was a burden. Said he was done taking care of me. Said I'd already given him everything I had, so I had no right to stay in his house." My stomach clenched so hard I thought I might be sick. "Dad threw you out? Tonight? In this storm?" Grandpa nodded, tears mixing with the rainwater still dripping from his hair. "Said the house was his now, bought with my money. Said if I didn't like the arrangement, I could find somewhere else to go. Packed my things in a garbage bag, William, like I was trash, and put me on the street." I felt rage building in my chest, hot and dangerous, the kind of anger that makes you do things you can't take back. My father and I had our differences, many differences, but this was beyond anything I'd imagined him capable of. This was cruelty of a magnitude that defied comprehension. "Where are your things?" I asked, trying to focus on practical matters before I did something stupid like drive to my parents' house and beat my father senseless. "Left them at the bus stop. Couldn't carry them anymore. These old arms." He looked down at his trembling hands. "Just the one bag. Everything I own in the world in one garbage bag." "We'll get it," I promised. "We'll get your things and then you're coming home with me. You'll stay with me as long as you need to. I can't impose." "You're not imposing. You're family. Real family. The kind that doesn't throw each other out in storms." I stood, helped him to his feet, noticing how much weight he'd lost, how frail he'd become. When had I last really looked at him? When had I last visited? The guilt was almost as strong as the anger. Doris appeared with a to-go cup of hot coffee and a bag of sandwiches. "On the house," she said when I tried to pay. "You just take care of him, honey. Man his age shouldn't be out in weather like this. Breaks my heart, what some people do to their own." I thanked her, wrapped my arm around Grandpa's shoulders, and guided him to my car. He moved slowly, carefully, like every step hurt. In the car, I turned the heat up full blast and pointed all the vents at him, trying to stop his shivering. "The bus stop," he said. "My things." "Which one?" "The one on Maple, by the old drugstore." I knew it. only 6 blocks from my parents' house. He'd made it that far in the storm before. What? Running out of strength? Hope? The will to keep going? I drove carefully through the flooded streets, found the bus stop, and there it was. A black garbage bag sitting in a puddle, abandoned like its owner had been. I retrieved it, thrown it in the trunk, and got back in the car. Grandpa was staring out the window, but I don't think he was seeing the storm. He was somewhere else, someone else, probably with my grandmother in better times. Grandpa, I said gently, I'm taking you to my apartment. It's not much, but it's warm and dry and you'll be safe there. Okay? He nodded without looking at me. Margaret would be so disappointed, he whispered. In all of us. What we've become. The drive to my apartment was quiet except for the rain and Grandpa's occasional confused murmurs. He called for Margaret twice, apologized for things I didn't understand, mentioned the ranch and cattle that no longer existed. I just drove and let him talk, my mind racing with plans and problems. My apartment was small, 1 bedroom, barely enough room for me. Where would he sleep? What about his medications? Did he need a doctor? How long could he stay? How long would he need to stay? But underneath all the practical concerns was a deeper current of rage. My father had taken $1.2 million from the ranch sale, Grandpa's entire life's work, and then thrown him out like garbage when taking care of him became inconvenient. It was theft and elder abuse and moral bankruptcy all rolled into one unforgivable act. My apartment building wasn't much to look at, a 3-story brick structure that had seen better decades. But it was home. I helped Grandpa inside, grateful for the elevator even if it groaned and shuddered. Mrs. Chun poked her head out again as we passed. "This your grandfather?" she asked, taking in his soaked appearance with sharp eyes. "Yes, he's going to be staying with me for a while." She nodded, disappeared into her apartment, and emerged with an armload of towels and a thick wool blanket. "My grandfather lived with me for 10 years, she said simply. "You need anything, you ask?" Inside my apartment, I got Grandpa into dry clothes. My sweatpants and hoodie hung on his diminished frame like he was a child playing dress-up. I settled him on my couch with hot tea and the blanket Mrs. Chun had provided, then retrieved his garbage bag from the car. The contents broke my heart all over again. 3 changes of clothes, all worn thin. His medications in a plastic baggie. A shaving kit that had seen better days. A photo album wrapped in plastic. His father's pocket watch, the one that was supposed to pass to me someday. A Bible with my grandmother's name embossed on the cover. That was it. The sum total of Samuel Harris's life, the man who'd built a ranching empire from nothing, who'd raised 2 children and weathered droughts and blizzards and market crashes, reduced to what could fit in a hefty bag. "Tell me what happened," I said gently, sitting in the chair across from him. "Start from the beginning. Take your time." He was quiet for so long I thought he might have fallen asleep. His eyes were closed, his breathing steady. Then he began to speak, his voice stronger now, tinged with the storyteller's cadence I remembered from childhood when he'd tell tales of the old days, of cattle drives and wild horses and building something from nothing. "6 months ago I sold the ranch," he said. "The Double H. For 1,000 acres of the finest grazing land in Colorado. Been in our family since 1892. Your great-great-grandfather homesteaded that land, proved it up with his own 2 hands. Your great-grandfather expanded it. Your grandfather, my father, modernized it. I maintained it, improved it, loved it like it was a living thing. I knew this part, or thought I did. The sale had been big news in our family, in the whole county. The Double H Ranch going to developers who planned to turn it into a subdivision called Prairie Vista Estates, or some such nonsense. End of an era, everyone said. Sign of the times. "I didn't want to sell," Grandpa continued. opening his eyes to stare at nothing. That land was my life, your grandmother's life, where we raised your father and your Aunt Sarah, where you learned to ride, remember? That little paint pony named Patches. I did remember. Summers at the ranch, the smell of hay and horses and leather. The endless sky that made you feel small and infinite at the same time. Learning to ride, to rope, to read the weather in cloud formations. I'd loved it, even as I'd known deep in my bones that I'd never be a rancher, that my dreams led to libraries and classrooms, not corrals and cattle. But I couldn't manage it alone anymore, he said. Not at my age. My hands don't work like they used to. My back's shot from too many years in the saddle. And after your grandmother passed, he paused, swallowed hard. The house was too empty. The land was too big. The silence was too loud. So Dad convinced you to sell? Grandpa's laugh was bitter as old coffee. Convinced. That's a nice word for it. He showed up one day with a briefcase full of papers and a head full of numbers. Told me about property values and development potential and tax implications. Said I was sitting on a gold mine, that it was foolish to hang on to land I couldn't work. Said I could live with him and your mother, be comfortable, not have to worry about anything for whatever time I had left. And you believed him? He's my son, Grandpa said simply, like that explained everything, and maybe it did. I raised him, changed his diapers, taught him to ride and rope and work cattle, sat up with him when he was sick, paid for his college when he decided ranching wasn't for him, same as I did for you. I thought that meant something, that when he said he'd take care of me, he meant it. So you gave him the money? Every penny. He said he'd manage it for me, make sure I was taken care of for whatever time I had left. Set up a nice room for me in their house. You know that big place they bought in Highlands Ranch? 5 bedrooms, 3-car garage. Homeowners association that fines you if your grass is the wrong shade of green. He shook his head. Nothing like the ranch, but he said it was better, safer, more convenient for doctors and such. I knew the house. Had been there exactly twice since they'd bought it 5 years ago. It was everything the ranch wasn't. Manicured, sterile, designed to impress rather than shelter. The kind of place where you took your shoes off at the door and worried about spilling things on the white carpet. At first it was fine, Grandpa said. I had my room, nice enough, I suppose. Bathroom attached so I didn't have to wander the halls at night. Your mother was kind enough, though she was always busy with her committees and charities. Funny how she has time to help strangers, but not. He trailed off, shook his head. That's not fair. Janet tried in her way. I doubted that, but kept my mouth shut. My mother had always been more concerned with appearances than substance. The perfect complement to my father's ambition. But then things started changing, Grandpa continued. Richard started talking about his investments, his plans. How the money from the ranch was working for us. Whatever that means. Bought a new truck, big fancy thing with leather seats and a computer screen in the dashboard. Then a boat. Can you imagine? A boat in Colorado. Said it was for entertaining clients. He was spending your money. Our money, he kept saying. Family money. For the family's benefit. Grandpa's hands shook as he lifted his tea. Then came the remodeling. Said the house needed updating. Granite countertops and hardwood floors and a home theater in the basement. All top of the line, all expensive. When I asked how much it was costing, he'd wave me off. Say it was an investment. Say it would increase the home's value. I could see where this was going, and my anger grew with each word. My father had taken the money meant for Grandpa's care and used it to upgrade his already excessive lifestyle. Did you say anything? Object. I tried, but every time I brought it up, Richard would get this look. Disappointed. Frustrated. like I was a child who didn't understand how the adult world worked. He'd remind me that I'd asked him to manage things, that I'd said I didn't want to worry about money anymore, that I should be grateful I had a nice place to live and food on the table. Grateful, I repeated, the word tasting like ash. Then the health issues started. Nothing major at first, dizzy spells, forgetting things. Normal for a man my age, I thought. But they got worse. I get confused, lose track of where I was. Once I got lost coming back from the bathroom, in a house I'd lived in for months. Scared me bad enough I asked Richard about seeing a doctor. What did he say? That I was being dramatic. That it was just old age. That doctors were expensive and would just tell me what we already knew. I was getting old and forgetful. Said if I was really worried, your mother could drive me to the clinic, but it would have to wait until after their vacation to Cabo. He refused to get you medical care? My hands were clenched so tight my knuckles ached. Not refused exactly, just delayed. Made it seem like I was being a burden for wanting it. Like I was overreacting. And maybe I was. Maybe it is just age. But Margaret always said it's better to be safe than sorry. And I wanted to be safe. You have every right to medical care. It's your money paying for it. That's what I told him. Tonight, after dinner. Grandpa's voice got quiet again. I'd had another spell. Couldn't remember where I was for almost an hour. Scared Janet pretty bad. She found me in the garage trying to saddle a horse that wasn't there. When Richard came home, she told him I needed to see a doctor. That it wasn't normal. And he exploded. Said I was being dramatic. Said I was playing up the confusion for attention. Said doctors were a waste of money for someone my age. That's when I made my mistake. What mistake? I reminded him it was my money. That I'd sold everything I'd worked for my whole life and given it to him to take care of me. That the least he could do was make sure I saw a doctor when I needed one. Grandpa paused, staring into his tea like it held answers. I waited, letting him tell it at his own pace even though I wanted to shake the rest out of him, wanted to race to my father's house and shake him instead. He laughed, Grandpa finally said. Not a nice laugh, a mean one. Said it wasn't my money anymore. Said I'd given it to him free and clear. Said there was no contract, no agreement, just a stupid old man who'd handed over everything and expected something in return. Said if I didn't like the arrangement, I could leave. So you said you'd leave? No. His voice was barely a whisper now. I said the money was supposed to be for my care. That he was my son. That family takes care of family. That's when he told me I wasn't family. I was a burden, a drain on resources, an old man who'd outlived his usefulness and was too stupid to realize it. My vision actually went red at the edges. I had to stand up, pace to the window, try to control the rage that made me want to break things. Preferably my father's face. He gave me 20 minutes to pack, Grandpa continued. Said I could take my clothes and nothing else. When I tried to take the photo album, he grabbed it, said the pictures were taken in his house so they belonged to him. I had to beg for it. Beg my own son for pictures of my dead wife. He finally threw it at me, said it was worthless anyway, just like me. Then he threw you out. Called me a cab, but I only had $40 in my wallet. He'd taken my credit cards months ago. Said it was for my own good so I wouldn't get confused and buy things. The cab driver took me as far as the bus stop before the money ran out. I was going to take the bus to somewhere. I don't know where. Then the rain started, and I couldn't remember which bus to take. And I was so cold, and everything was so confusing. He was crying again, silent tears that broke my heart more than sobs would have. I found the diner. Doris was kind. Gave me coffee, let me sit. I remembered I had your number in my wallet. Wrote it down last time you called. Just in case. Just in case of what, I don't know. But I guess I know now. You did the right thing, I said, coming back to sit across from him. You're safe now. You'll stay here with me. For as long as you need. I can't be a burden to you too. You're not a burden. You never were. Dad's wrong. And what he did tonight was criminal. It's his money now. Nothing criminal about kicking out a house guest. But I wasn't so sure. Elder abuse, financial exploitation, there had to be some recourse. But that was for tomorrow. Tonight I just needed to take care of him. I set him up in my bedroom, taking the couch for myself. He protested, but I insisted. My bedroom was warmer, had the better mattress, and was farther from the street noise. As I was gathering pillows and blankets for my couch bed, he called me back. William? Why did you leave the ranch? Really? It was a question he'd never asked before. Everyone knew I'd left for college and never came back, choosing teaching over ranching. But no one had ever asked why exactly. They just assumed I wasn't cut out for ranch life, that I was too soft or too bookish or too something. Because I saw what it was doing to Dad, I said honestly, sitting on the edge of the bed. The way he looked at the land and saw only dollars. The way he treated the workers like equipment instead of people. The way he talked about you and Grandma when you weren't around, like you were obstacles to his plans instead of the people who'd built everything he wanted to inherit. Grandpa was quiet, digesting this. I loved the ranch, I continued. Still do. Some of my best memories are there. But I couldn't become him. Couldn't turn into someone who valued profit over people, who saw family as either assets or liabilities. So I chose a different path. One where I could help people instead of using them. Teaching, he said. And for the first time it didn't sound like disappointment. Teaching. It doesn't pay much, and Dad thinks it's a waste of my potential. But when I help a kid understand something they've been struggling with, when I see that light go on in their eyes, when I get a letter from a former student saying I made a difference, that's worth more than any ranch. He nodded slowly. You were smarter than I was. I kept hoping Richard would change. Kept thinking if I just gave him one more chance, loved him a little harder, he'd become the son I tried to raise. But maybe some people are just born counting coins instead of blessings. It's not your fault, Grandpa. You did your best. Sometimes that's not enough, but it's not your fault. He reached out, patted my hand with his trembling one. You're a good boy, William. Always were. Your grandmother saw it. Said you had a gentle heart in a hard world. Said that was a rare thing. I miss her, I admitted. So do I. Every day. But tonight, sitting in that diner, I could hear her voice clear as day. Call Billy, she said. He'll help. And here you are. I squeezed his hand gently. Get some rest. Tomorrow we'll figure everything out. See a doctor, talk to a lawyer, get your life sorted. But tonight, just rest. You're safe. I left him to sleep and spent the night on my couch, laptop open, researching elder law and financial abuse. By morning, I had a plan and a list of phone numbers. But first, I needed to make sure Grandpa was okay. He was up before me, standing in my tiny kitchen looking lost. The morning light was cruel, showing just how much weight he'd lost, how pale he was, how his clothes hung on him like scarecrows. I don't remember where the bathroom is, he said, fear in his voice. I showed him. It was 10 feet away, and made a mental note to get him to a doctor immediately. This wasn't just age. This was something medical, something that needed treatment, something my father had criminally neglected. After he was dressed and we'd had breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast, simple but filling, I made calls. First to the school, arranging for a substitute for the next few days. Family emergency, I told them, which was the absolute truth. Then to a doctor who specialized in geriatric care, who could see us that afternoon. then to a lawyer who handled elder abuse cases, who was very interested in our story. Financial exploitation of the elderly is more common than people think, Jennifer Martinez told me over the phone. And if your grandfather gave the money with the explicit understanding it was for his care, we might have a case. Bring any documentation you have. Documentation. Did we have any? I asked Grandpa. Richard had me sign some papers when I gave him the money, he said, frowning with concentration. Power of attorney, he said, and something else. A gift letter? I can't quite remember. He kept all the copies. Of course he did. My father might be morally bankrupt, but he wasn't stupid. He'd have covered his legal bases. The doctor's appointment that afternoon was revealing and infuriating in equal measure. Dr. Patel ran a battery of tests, asked dozens of questions, and looked increasingly concerned as the appointment progressed. Mr. Harris is showing clear signs of dementia, she told me privately while a nurse helped Grandpa with some cognitive exercises. Early stage but progressing. With proper medication and care, we can slow the progression significantly. But I'm concerned about how long he's gone without treatment. How long would these symptoms have been noticeable? Months at least, possibly a year or more. Anyone living with him would have seen the signs. The confusion, the memory loss, the disorientation. It's impossible to miss if you're paying attention. If you're paying attention. But my father hadn't been paying attention to anything but the dollar signs. Is it reversible? Some of the confusion might improve with medication. But dementia is progressive. We can slow it down, improve quality of life, but we can't stop it entirely. She looked at me with kind eyes. He'll need consistent care, routine, patience. It's not easy. I'll manage, I said, and meant it. There are resources available. Support groups, home health aides. Don't try to do this alone. But alone was all I had. My father had made that clear. Still, I nodded and thanked her, collected Grandpa and his new prescriptions, and headed home. That evening, as I was helping Grandpa organize his medications into a weekly pill container, my phone rang. I looked at the caller ID and felt my jaw clench. I almost didn't answer, but some perverse curiosity made me swipe accept. William. My father's voice was cold, controlled. Nothing like a man who'd thrown his father into a storm. I heard you have Dad. I have Grandpa, yes, since you threw him out. He left voluntarily. We had a disagreement about household rules, and he chose to leave. Household rules? Is that what you're calling elder abuse now? Don't be dramatic. He's an adult who made a choice. If he's told you some sob story about being mistreated, I saw him, I interrupted, soaked, confused, abandoned at a bus stop with his belongings in a garbage bag. What kind of man does that to his own father? A man who's tired of being taken advantage of. He shot back. Do you have any idea what I've dealt with these past months? The wandering, the confusion, the constant needs? Your mother couldn't handle it. It was affecting our lives, our marriage. Then you should have gotten him help. Medical help. Not thrown him out. Medical help costs money. His money. The $1.2 million you took from the ranch sale. There was silence on the line. Then, that money is gone. Invested. Tied up in non-liquid assets. The market's been volatile. You spent it. On yourself. On your house and your boat and your lifestyle. I spent it on my family. On our future. Dad had his time. This is mine. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. He's your father. And? That doesn't make him my responsibility forever. I gave him 6 months. 6 months of room and board. That's more than most would do. Most wouldn't steal his life savings first. I didn't steal anything. He gave me that money freely. I have the paperwork to prove it. So before you start making accusations, maybe consider who's paying for his care now. Because it won't be me. I don't want your money. I want you to admit what you did was wrong. He laughed, an ugly sound. Wrong? I gave him a place to live, fed him, put up with his decline. What did you do, William? When's the last time you visited? When's the last time you called? You walked away from this family years ago, and now you want to play the hero? Fine. He's your problem now. See how long your bleeding heart lasts when you're cleaning up after him at 3 a.m. He hung up before I could respond. I stood there, phone in hand, shaking with rage. Not at his words, I'd expected those, but at his complete lack of remorse. He'd stolen from his father, neglected his health, thrown him out like garbage, and felt justified in all of it. That was Richard? Grandpa asked from the doorway. I hadn't heard him approach. Yeah, making sure I knew he wasn't going to help. He was always good at making sure people knew where they stood. Grandpa moved to the couch, sat down heavily. Even as a boy, black and white, no shades of gray. You were either useful to him or you weren't. How did he become like that? You and Grandma weren't like that. I don't know. Nature versus nurture, I suppose. We gave him and Sarah the same raising, but they turned out so different. Sarah calls every week, sends pictures of the grandkids. Richard. Well, you saw what Richard became. We sat in silence for a while. Then Grandpa said, I should probably look into one of those senior homes. Assisted living, they call it. I've got $40 and my Social Security. Maybe it's enough. You're not going to a home, I interrupted. You're staying here. We're going to get your money back, or at least make sure Dad can't waste any more of it. And we're going to get you proper care. William, you can't fight your father on this. He's got all the cards, the paperwork, the lawyers, the connections. And you've got you, I finished. I've got you. And sometimes that's enough. He smiled sadly. Your grandmother used to say something like that. All we need is each other. But she's gone. And I'm just a confused old man who can't even find the bathroom in a 2-room apartment. You're Samuel Harris, I said firmly. You built a ranch from nothing. You raised 2 kids and countless cattle. You survived droughts and floods and market crashes. You're not just anything. You're my grandfather, and you deserve better than what happened to you. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm. I'd wake early, help Grandpa with his morning routine, make sure he took his medications, then head to school. Mrs. Chun would check on him during the day. She'd volunteered without being asked, said it was no trouble, said he reminded her of her own grandfather. I'd come home for lunch when I could, then back for the afternoon classes, then home for good by 4. Evenings were for doctor appointments, lawyer consultations, and the slow work of rebuilding a life. The medications helped with the confusion, though he still had bad days. Days when he called me Richard and flinched. Days when he looked for Margaret in every room. Days when he stood at the window, staring out at the city skyline like he was looking for mountains and rangeland that no longer existed. The legal case was more challenging than I'd hoped. Jennifer Martinez was talented and committed, but the law was murky when it came to family financial disputes. Your father was smart, she told me after reviewing the documents Grandpa had signed. This gift letter is pretty airtight. Your grandfather gave him the money with no strings attached, legally speaking. The fact that there was a verbal agreement about care, that's harder to prove. So he gets away with it? Not necessarily. Elder abuse and neglect charges are still possible. And if we can show your grandfather lacked capacity when he signed these documents due to undiagnosed dementia, but that's hard to prove too. Yes, these cases usually are. Family dynamics, he said, she said, elderly victims who make imperfect witnesses. But we have some things in our favor. The timing of everything, for one. The fact that your father threw him out immediately after spending the money, for another. And now we have medical documentation of his condition. It was something, but it felt like not enough. My father had stolen $1.2 million and faced maybe a slap on the wrist. Meanwhile, I was spending my savings on Grandpa's medications and watching my credit cards creep toward their limits. But I'd make it work. Teachers were good at making do with less. My relationship with Lisa, who I'd been dating for 6 months, didn't survive the new arrangement. She tried to be understanding at first, but after the 3rd canceled date, the 5th weekend spent at home instead of out, the 10th time I had to leave early because Grandpa needed me, her patience wore out. "I get that you want to help him," she said during what would be our last conversation. "But you're 32, Will. You can't put your entire life on hold for this. He's my grandfather. He has no one else. And what about us? What about your future? Are you going to be his caretaker forever? If that's what it takes, yes." She looked at me like I'd grown a second head. That's crazy. He should be in a home, somewhere with professional care. Those places cost thousands a month. Money we don't have because my father stole it all. Then let your father deal with the consequences. Take your grandfather back, dump him on their doorstep, make it their problem. I stared at her, wondering how I'd so badly misjudged her character. "I can't do that. Can't or won't. Both." She left that night, and I added another loss to the growing tally. But I couldn't abandon Grandpa. Not like everyone else had. Not when he'd been there for every birthday, every school play, every milestone of my childhood. Not when he'd supported my choice to teach even when the rest of the family mocked it. Not when he needed me. 3 months into our new arrangement, I got an unexpected call. Aunt Sarah, my father's sister who lived in Phoenix. "William? I just heard about Dad. I can't believe Richard. Is he okay? Are you okay?" I filled her in on everything, Grandpa's condition, the legal situation, our daily struggles. She listened without interrupting, then said the magic words, "How can I help?" Turns out she could help a lot. She started sending money. Not much, she wasn't wealthy, but enough to ease the medication costs. She called Grandpa daily, giving him someone else to talk to. She flew out once a month to give me a break, to take Grandpa to appointments or just sit with him while I caught up on grading or sleep or sanity. "I should have known," she said during one visit, watching Grandpa nap in his chair. "I should have checked on him more. But Richard always said everything was fine, and I was so far away, and I failed him too." "You didn't throw him out in a storm." "No, but I let Richard control everything. I knew what he was like, how he valued money over everything else. I should have protected Dad. We all should have done things differently. But we're here now. That's what matters." She brought up something I'd been avoiding thinking about. "What happens long-term, Will? His condition is going to get worse. You can't manage alone forever." "I'll manage as long as I can." And then, I didn't have an answer. The future stretched out like a darkening road, full of uncertainty and inevitable loss. But I couldn't think about that. I could only handle today, this moment, this need. Then, on a quiet Tuesday morning in March, everything changed. I woke to find Grandpa hadn't gotten up for coffee. He was still in bed, peaceful, like he'd just decided not to wake up. His face was calm, almost smiling, one hand stretched out like he was reaching for someone. "Margaret," I whispered, knowing somehow that she'd finally come for him. The paramedics said it had been quick. A stroke in his sleep. No pain. A mercy, they called it. I sat with his body until the funeral home came, holding his hand that had once been so strong. that had built fences and delivered calves and held my grandmother through 43 years of marriage. I'd known this was coming. His health had been declining despite the medication, but knowing didn't make it easier. I called Sarah first. She cried, said she'd fly out immediately. Then I called my mother because someone had to tell her, and she could tell my father. She took the news with her characteristic emotional distance. "Well," she said after a pause, "I suppose it's for the best." He wasn't himself anymore. "He was always himself," I said. "He just needed help being himself. Help you and Dad denied him. William, don't start. Your father did what he thought was best. For himself. Not for Grandpa. I'm not having this argument. When is the funeral?" I gave her the details and hung up, already exhausted by my family's ability to make everything worse. The funeral was small but meaningful. Sarah and I had planned it together, focusing on who Grandpa had been rather than what he'd become. We held it at the old Lutheran church near where the ranch used to be, the one where he'd married Grandma in 1959. Some of the old ranch hands came, men in their 70s and 80s who remembered Samuel Harris as a fair boss and a good man. Mrs. Chun came, dressed in her finest black dress, and sat with the family like she belonged there, which she did. My parents showed up, of course. Dad in an expensive suit that probably cost more than Grandpa's monthly medications. Mom in designer black that seemed to actively repel genuine emotion. Dad even had the audacity to give a eulogy, standing at the podium and talking about his father's legacy, the ranch's history, the importance of family. "We had our differences toward the end," he said, managing to sound both sorrowful and magnanimous. "But I loved my father, and I know he loved me. I'm grateful we were able to provide him a comfortable home in his final months, and that William was able to spend quality time with him at the end. Family takes care of family, after all." I wanted to stand up and scream the truth, to tell everyone how this man had thrown his father into a storm with nothing but $40 and a garbage bag, how he'd stolen everything and given nothing back. But this wasn't the place. Let him have his performance. The truth would come soon enough. After the service, as people were gathering for the reception in the church basement, Dad approached me. Up close, I could see the calculation in his eyes, the wheels turning. "William," he said, his voice pitched for the surrounding mourners to hear. "Thank you for taking care of Dad at the end. I know it wasn't easy." "No," I said, not playing along. "It wasn't, especially without any help from the person who stole his life savings." His face tightened, but he maintained his concerned son act. "This isn't the time or place. You're right. The time was 6 months ago when he needed medical care. The place was your house where he should have been safe. But you chose money over family, and now we're here." "Keep your voice down," he hissed. "Why? Afraid people will learn the truth? That the great Richard Harris is actually a thief and an elder abuser." He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. "Listen, you little. Everything okay here?" It was Tom Rodriguez, one of the old ranch hands, all 6'4" of weathered muscle and protective instinct. He'd known me since I was knee-high and apparently hadn't forgotten. Dad released my arm, stepped back. "Everything's fine. Just a family discussion." Didn't look like a discussion from where I was standing. Tom looked at me. "You need anything, Will?" "I'm good, Tom. Thanks." Dad retreated, but not before leaning in to whisper, "This isn't over. Dad's gone, but there are still matters to settle. Financial matters. Legal matters. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I watched him walk away, wondering what fresh hell he was planning now. The will reading was scheduled for the following week at the offices of Brennan and Associates. Not Dad's usual lawyers, which was interesting. Grandpa must have had his own attorney for this. someone Dad couldn't influence or control. I arrived to find the conference room already full. Dad and Mom, looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. Sarah, who gave me a small smile and came to sit beside me. A few distant cousins who I barely recognized, clearly here hoping for some small bequest. And at the head of the table, a lawyer I'd never seen before, an elderly woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Patricia Brennan. I've been Mr. Samuel Harris's personal attorney for the past 40 years, handling matters that were separate from the family business. We're here to read his last will and testament, which was updated 6 months ago. 6 months ago, right before he'd sold the ranch. I leaned forward, suddenly very interested. Dad was less pleased. 6 months ago? He was already showing signs of dementia then. Any changes he made were made with full mental capacity as verified by 3 independent doctors and a psychiatric evaluation. Patricia interrupted smoothly. Mr. Harris was quite thorough. She opened a leather folder and began to read. The beginning was standard, funeral arrangements already handled. Minor bequests to old friends and longtime employees. Then came the meat of it. To my daughter, Sarah Mitchell, I leave the sum of $50,000 and your mother's jewelry collection, which I've kept safe all these years. You were always a good daughter, calling and visiting when you could. I'm sorry distance kept us apart more than we liked. Sarah was crying quietly. The cousins looked disappointed. If Sarah only got $50,000, they were probably getting less. To my son, Richard Harris, Patricia continued, and I could feel Dad tense beside me. I leave the sum of $1. The room went absolutely silent. $1, Dad repeated, his voice deadly quiet. That's a mistake. I'm afraid not. Mr. Harris was quite specific. He goes on to say, this dollar represents the value you placed on my life when you cast me out. May it remind you that some things matter more than money, though I doubt you'll learn that lesson now. Dad was on his feet. This is ridiculous. I'm his son. I'm entitled to. You're entitled to exactly what he left you, Patricia said calmly, which is $1. Would you like me to continue? There's more, Sarah asked. Oh yes, the bulk of the estate. Patricia turned to me. To my grandson, William Harris, I leave the remainder of my estate, including all personal property, financial accounts, and any claims to assets improperly transferred or stolen. What estate? Dad snarled. I have the ranch money. There is no estate. Patricia smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. Actually, Mr. Harris, that brings us to the interesting part. You see, your father never actually sold the ranch. The silence that followed was deafening. I felt like the world had tilted off its axis. What do you mean he never sold it? I asked. The sale to developers was never completed. Oh, the negotiations were real. The offer was real. But 3 days before closing, Mr. Harris changed his mind. He informed the buyers he was withdrawing from the sale. But the money, Dad whispered. The $1.2 million. I have it. He gave it to me. Yes, about that. Patricia pulled out another document. This is a loan agreement, signed by you, Mr. Harris, borrowing $1.2 million from your father's trust. The terms were quite specific. The money was to be used for his care and medical needs, with any remainder to be returned upon his death or if he no longer needed care. That's not. He said it was from the ranch sale. He told you what you wanted to hear, and you were so eager to get your hands on the money, you didn't ask too many questions or look too closely at what you were signing. I thought back to Grandpa's confusion about the papers he'd signed. But it hadn't been confusion at all. He'd been testing his son, seeing if greed would override caution. And Dad had failed spectacularly. So the ranch, I asked, still exists. still in the family. And now, as the sole beneficiary of your grandfather's estate, it belongs to you. Along with this, she handed me a sealed envelope with my name on it in Grandpa's shaking handwriting. I opened it with trembling fingers. My dear William, if you're reading this, then my plan worked and you're probably as shocked as everyone else in that room. I'm sorry for the deception, but I needed to know. After your grandmother died, I realized I couldn't trust my own judgment about people anymore. She was always the one who saw through the nonsense to the truth. Without her, I was lost. So I devised a test. I told Richard about the ranch sale, let him believe it was happening. When he immediately started planning how to spend the money, my money, the fruit of 60 years of labor, I knew, but I needed to be sure. So I gave him the loan, told him it was the sale proceeds, and waited. He had 6 months to prove me wrong. 6 months to use that money for my care, to be the son I'd hoped I'd raised. Instead, he used it for himself and threw me out when I became inconvenient. Thank God you were there to catch me. Thank God one of my boys became the man I'd tried to raise. The ranch is yours now. All 4,000 acres free and clear. The developers were offering $1.2 million, but the land is worth more than that. Or maybe it's worthless. Land is only worth what someone will pay, after all. But it's yours to decide. Sell it, keep it, donate it, whatever you think is right. I trust your judgment in a way I can't trust my own anymore. There's also about 200,000 in various accounts that Richard didn't know about. Your grandmother always insisted on keeping some money separate, just in case. She was smarter than me in so many ways. I know the last months were hard on you. I know what you sacrificed to take care of me. But you gave me something precious, dignity in my decline. Love when I was unlovable, proof that I'd done something right in this world by being part of creating you. Your father will fight this, of course. He'll claim I was incompetent, that you influenced me, that it's unfair. Let him. I've left enough evidence of his betrayal to bury him if he tries. Patricia has it all, recordings, documents, witness statements. He can take his dollar and be grateful I didn't have him charged with elder abuse, though you still can if you choose. Be happy, William. Use this gift to build the life you want, not the life others expect. Take care of Sarah. She's a good soul who got stuck with the same parents you did. And remember your grandmother and me not as we ended, but as we were, imperfect people who loved you perfectly. All my love, Grandpa. P.S. Check the old barn on the ranch. I left something there for you. I looked up from the letter to find everyone staring at me. Dad's face had gone from red to purple to a color I didn't think existed in nature. This won't stand, he said. I'll contest it. Mental incapacity. Undue influence. Fraud. You're welcome to try, Patricia said calmly. But I should warn you, Mr. Harris anticipated that. We have video depositions, medical evaluations, and extensive documentation of his mental state. We also have evidence of your financial exploitation, neglect, and abuse. If you really want to go to court, we'll be happy to present it all. And there's the matter of the loan, she continued. $1.2 million that needs to be repaid immediately, per the terms you signed. Unless you can prove you spent it all on your father's care. Dad sank into his chair. Mom reached for his hand, but he shook her off. The cousins were already heading for the door, the show over and no profit to be made. Is there anything else? I asked Patricia. Just this. She handed me a set of keys. To the ranch. Your grandfather never changed the locks. Said the place was waiting for you whenever you were ready. Sarah hugged me as we left the office. I'm happy for you, she said, and grateful. If it had gone to Richard, he'd have sold it to developers before Grandpa was cold in the ground. I finished. What will you do with it? I don't know yet. I need to see it first. Figure out what feels right. Can I come with you? When you go. Of course. It's your heritage too. We drove out the next day, Sarah and I, leaving the city behind for the open country. The roads grew familiar as muscle memory kicked in. Left at the old gas station, now a Starbucks. Right at the crossroads where the accident happened in '92. Straight on until the mountains rose like promises on the horizon. The gate to the Double H was rusty but solid. The cattle guard rattled under our tires like a welcome. And then we were on ranch land, our land, for 1,000 acres of grass and possibility. The house stood empty but patient, like it had been waiting. Smaller than I remembered, memory has a way of making childhood places larger but solid. Built to last by people who understood permanence. Inside, everything was as Grandpa had left it 6 months ago. His coffee cup still in the sink. His reading glasses on the kitchen table. The calendar on the wall still showing August, frozen at the moment he'd walked away expecting to come back. It's like a time capsule, Sarah said softly. We explored room by room, memories flooding back. The kitchen where Grandma had made thousands of meals. The living room where we'd gathered for Christmas. Grandpa's study, still smelling of leather and pipe tobacco he'd given up 20 years ago. And on his desk, a photo I'd never seen. Him and Grandma on their wedding day, young and hopeful, not knowing that 60 years later their son would betray everything they'd built together. You okay? Sarah asked. Yeah, just processing. It's a lot. The ranch, the money, the truth about Dad. I still can't believe he never actually sold it. He played a long game, I said. Grandpa always was smarter than people gave him credit for. We found the barn he'd mentioned in his letter. Inside, under a tarp, was Grandpa's truck. A 1976 Ford F-150, lovingly maintained. On the seat was another envelope. William, this was my first new truck, bought with cattle money in '76. Your grandmother said it was too expensive, but I was proud as a peacock. Taught you to drive in this truck when you were 14, remember? You ground the gears something awful, but you got the hang of it. It's yours now. Still runs like a dream if you treat her right. Thought you might want something of mine that wasn't land or legacy or legal troubles. Just a truck that's been places and seen things and always brought us home. Love, Grandpa. I ran my hand over the worn steering wheel, remembering those driving lessons. Grandpa patient as a saint while I jerked and stalled around the ranch roads. Clutch is like a handshake, he'd said. Too soft and nothing happens. Too hard and you offend everybody. Got to find the sweet spot. You keeping it all? Sarah asked as we stood looking out over the pastures. I don't know. It's a lot of land for someone who doesn't ranch. You could learn. I'm a teacher, not a cowboy. You're a Harris, she said simply. That used to mean something. Could again, with the right person running things. I thought about it as we drove back to Denver. The ranch, the legacy, the chance to rebuild something my father had tried to destroy. It was tempting, but I had a life in Denver, students who depended on me, a career I'd built and loved. But I also had 4,000 acres of possibility and a grandfather's faith that I'd do the right thing with it. Over the next few months, I split my time between Denver and the ranch. Weekends and school breaks spent fixing fences, clearing out the house, deciding what to do with it all. Dad had tried to make good on his threats to contest the will, but backed down when Patricia's firm sent him a preview of the evidence they'd present. The loan came due, and he had to liquidate most of his assets to pay it back. The house in Highlands Ranch, the boat, the luxury cars, all gone to repay what he'd stolen. He called me once during this time. Not to apologize, Richard Harris didn't do apologies, but to bargain. The ranch is too much for you to handle, he said. I have connections with developers. We could partner. I hung up on him. Some conversations weren't worth having. In the end, I found a solution that felt right. I kept 1,000 acres around the main house and barn, enough to maintain the heart of the Double H. The other 3,000 I sold, but not to developers. To the Nature Conservancy, ensuring it would remain open land forever. The money from that sale went into a trust for rural education, funding scholarships for ranch kids who wanted to go to college but couldn't afford it. I still teach in Denver during the school year, but summers and breaks, I'm at the ranch. I've learned to run cattle, just a small herd, nothing like Grandpa's operation, but enough to keep the land active and purposeful. Sarah brings her kids out to ride and explore. Even Mom has visited, though she and Dad are divorced now, his financial ruin being the final straw in a marriage built on appearances. The house has life in it again. Not full-time, not like before, but enough. I've turned Grandpa's study into a writing room where I work on curriculum and sometimes just sit and think about legacies and choices and the price of integrity. Mrs. Chun visits sometimes, driving her ancient Buick 3 hours to bring me Chinese food and check that I'm eating properly. Your grandfather would be proud, she always says, and I believe her. The ranch hand cottage has been converted into a retreat for teachers, a place where burned-out educators can come for a week or two, no charge, to remember why they chose this profession. It's booked solid through next summer. And in the barn, that old Ford still runs like a dream. I drive it into town sometimes, windows down, radio playing the classic country Grandpa loved. People wave, recognizing the truck if not the driver. The Harris boy, they say, the one who came back, the one who stayed. It's not the life I'd planned. But then, very little has gone according to plan since that phone call on a stormy night. A grandfather thrown out like trash. A fortune that was never real. A ranch that was never sold. A test disguised as betrayal. A gift wrapped in loss. But mostly a lesson in what matters. Not the money, though having it helps. Not the land, though keeping it feels right. But the choice to help when helping is hard. The decision to stay when leaving would be easier. The recognition that family isn't just about blood, but about who shows up when the storms come. Grandpa knew that. He learned it the hard way, watching his son choose greed over love. But he also learned that sometimes the universe provides second chances. Guardian angels disguised as grandsons who'll drive through floods to bring you home. These days, when storms roll through the ranch, and they do, fierce and sudden in this part of the country, I make sure the lights are on and the doors unlocked, just in case someone needs shelter. Just in case someone's grandfather is out there with $40 and nowhere to go. Because that's what you do with an inheritance like this. You don't hoard it. You share it. You pass it on. You make sure that the cruelty stops here, that the cycle breaks, that love wins even when it seems to lose. The Double H Ranch. 4,000 acres reduced to 1,000, but those 1,000 acres mean more than the 4,000 ever did. Because they're not just land now. They're proof that some things can't be sold, that some debts can't be collected, that some tests are passed not in the taking but in the giving. Grandpa gave my father $1.2 million and a chance to prove himself worthy. He gave me 3 months of 3 a.m. confusion and careful medication schedules and the slow sadness of watching a great man diminish. I got the better deal. And somewhere, in whatever comes after this life, I think he knows it. I think he's sitting with Grandma, maybe fishing in some celestial stock pond, and she's saying, "I told you Billy would do right." And he's nodding, that slow nod that meant more than words, and saying, "He did, Margaret. He surely did. That's my inheritance. Not the ranch or the money or the truck, but the knowledge that when tested, really tested, storm in your face, grandfather on your doorstep tested, I made the choice he'd hoped I'd make. I chose love, and that's worth more than all the ranches in Colorado." Thank you for listening to my story. If you're like me, Someone who spent years trying to earn love that was never truly offered. You know, these aren't just stories. They're mirrors of our deepest wounds and greatest triumphs. Subscribe if these stories resonate with your journey. Hit that notification bell. Think of it as our regular meetup, where we share truths that others might not understand. And please, leave a comment below. Tell me, have you ever felt like an outsider in your own family? What would you have done in my shoes? Your words matter to me, and they matter to everyone here who's walked this lonely path. Tomorrow, I'll be back with another story. Until then, remember, family isn't always blood, and sometimes the greatest gift is discovering who you truly are. Take care of yourself. You deserve it.